the idea for the Eden biomes. It was very much, and it's actually really explicit of how Grimshaw work in taking a very constraints-led approach, starting from basic principles and moving on to come with an idea which is again born out of the function and the needs of the building. And in fact, Grimshaw as an office has, we've made a pledge to try and make all our projects net zero carbon by 2030.
Please put your hands together for architect Adina Bisek from Grimshaw.
So I've been with Grimshaw since 2011, and Grimshaw is, as many of you might know, an international global architectural company, and we have offices in Australia, in New York, in the US, and also in Dubai and in Paris, as well as the key office being in London. We've got about 400 staff, and really the focus of the company very much is the creation of high quality, world-class projects. And these arise from collaborative working. We really believe as architects that we can design buildings together, collaborative working, contextual responses, and really driving forward innovation in design. We approach our projects with that idea that we have to find unique solutions to all the different challenges that they pose us. And obviously, Grimshaw, it's a multifaceted company. We work across different scales of projects, different sectors as well, and different typologies. And here are just some of these examples as well. Now, all of this really comes from Nicholas Grimshaw. He's the founder of the practice. And Nick had a real sense of the technical, the functional aspect of design. And he really felt that buildings should demonstrate their purpose. They should be explicit in what they stand for and the purpose that they fulfill. And then the idea was that form follows on from function. And you can just see, obviously, Nick has retired now. And so these are just some images of the time when he was very much the kind of key architect and very much involved in the business. And from Nick's ideology has come forward our brand DNA, our approach to design. First and foremost is obviously the idea is the buildings have to be ecologically sustainable. In this time of climate emergency, we absolutely cannot ignore sustainable, ensuring that buildings are foremost really achieving the net zero carbon. And in fact, Grimshaw as an office we've made a pledge to try and make all our projects net zero carbon by 2030. Next is the idea of making buildings which are elegantly efficient, ensuring, again, going back to Nick's ideology about ensuring that they are very much performing to the best of their ability and being elegant about it. And that elegance in design very much comes from the finely detailed aspect. When we look at design, we consider all aspects of that building in very, very careful detail, and that starts to show in our final projects. And mostly, and in fact, just going back to what Rob said this morning, people are critical to our projects. All our projects are people-centric. We need to make sure that we have the sense of the user, the end user in mind at the time when we design. So these are the sort of key ethos of the company. And obviously within there, this idea of infrastructure and place. And infrastructure and place is also, there's a sort of sense of global and localism in there. Global because the provision of infrastructure is so paramount to projects to ensure that they perform to the highest of their ability and making sure that they have all the provision of services that they need, but then taking that science of building and then making it very local and place-specific. And that's what gives that kind of unique quality to architecture and to buildings as well. And that's what I want to focus today, and I will clearly demonstrate this from those two projects. The first one obviously being Eden. I don't know how many of you are, it's obviously now a very iconic, it's an old project. It was built in the 90s, but obviously and it has really been a signature project for Grimshaw. Now, the Eden project, if you essentially think, what is it? It is essentially a greenhouse for plants. And when the client came to us, what they wanted was a place for global biodiversity, a place where plants um, could be exhibited, a place which was to entertain and to educate as well. But more than that, they wanted them to be two biomes, one to have the humid and rainforest plants, and the other one was for Mediterranean temperate plants. And then obviously they also wanted another enclosure which was more open for temperate. So the idea was to have these enclosures to be able to exhibit plants, to educate and to entertain. But more than that, what the client wanted was he wanted the plants to reach their full height in their maturity, and that was essentially designing to accommodate something which could have a canopy size about 40 meters, and that set the parameters for our building size to be about 50 meters, which meant that we were looking to design one of the biggest glass houses in the world at that time. So keeping that challenge in mind, and the other one, the client also came to us because at that time we had just finished the completion of the Waterloo International Rail Station in London, which was obviously at that time the first Eurostar. It was a gateway to the UK from Europe. And this was a real icon for railway architecture. It signified a new renaissance for high-speed links and obviously a gateway to UK as well. And as you can see in this, the challenge there had been to create this sinuous roof form which would follow the track alignments. And what we did, working with engineers, was to really develop a glass size, which was we were able to repeat it across the sinuous form and then creating this kind of snake-like structure. So the client took that and wanted that to be a prototype for the biomes at Eden. They also went through a site selection process before they came to us, and they eventually chose this particular site in the west of the country near St. Austell. And this was actually an old clay mining pit. It was coming to the end of its life, and the idea was actually this would create a fantastic place for Eden project. So we took inspiration from that hollow in the ground and then went back to first principles and started to understand, well, what is the evolution of greenhouses or glass houses in the world? And we went back in time to the 17th, 18th century, when actually that's when glass houses first came to being. I mean, this was, if you start to look at the tradition of glass houses, this was at the time when explorers were going out, adventurers were going out exploring the world, and they were bringing back tropical plants to the UK, and these had to be housed in very protective environments. At that time, and this one is in Chatsworth by Joseph Paxman, these were built with wood and glass. And Joseph Paxman was particularly known about industrializing this process and starting to look at ways that this could be prefabricated, and then also, looking at economies and speed of construction. In the industrial times, the wood was then replaced by steel, and so you started getting these steel and iron and glass structures like the ones that you see here. These are obviously very famous, as the Palm House in Kew Gardens and the Kibble Palace in Glasgow. And these are beautiful structures, and they were obviously large, beautiful quality of light, and they started to become icons at that age. So the challenge for us very much was to how could we now really look at creating the next typology of greenhouse, really taking on that tradition which the Victorians had set for us 150 years before. As we all do, we looked at the site for inspiration, and you can see this was not an easy site. In fact, at the time when the designers were looking at it, it was at the end of its life, so the topography of the site was still changing. But what we thought would be really nice is to create these biomes using the walls of the site as part of the architecture and starting to really work the site with the architecture. And obviously then going back to Waterloo and seeing how those arches that we had in Waterloo could be married, and then you start to create a structure. And then you can see that this is one of the plans which was actually coming up at that time, this kind of sinuous quality. But what we found was a major challenge was because the site was still changing, we really needed to look at something much more flexible and something which could actually be also logistically transported to Cornwall. These steel trusses that we had used in Waterloo were basically too heavy to be transported. Now, inspiration, influences, ideas come from various places, and the teams had been encouraged by this film, which is from the 1970s, called Silent Running. And in the film, if you ever get a chance to see it, they have these lightweight biomes which float in space. And we thought, well, can we make something as lightweight as that? Nature can also be a fantastic place for inspiration, especially if you look at honeycombs. The hexagonal structures are really very robust. They have a careful use of resource and minimum use of energy. So starting to look at these, and also these hexagonal structures, they exist across many scales, and from microscopic organisms all the way to insect wings as well. Especially when you look at dragonfly wings, you'll see the hexagonal structure, and the way it's attached to the primary structure is also at right angles, which was actually really critical for us in terms of developing that structure for the biomes. Sometimes you can get inspired by water and soap bubbles. When you look at water and soap, the structure is actually partially sliced spheres which come together and they attach each other at right angles. And this was starting to give a sense of what the biomes could actually look like. And so here you can see how the biomes are actually cut slices of spheres which come together and attach each other at right angles. And obviously the seam where they're attached, that's the critical bit of the structure which is taking the load, allowing the rest of the biome structure to be really lightweight. And the structure itself, it's still the hexagonal, which was inspired by the honeycombs. And this allowed for a very flexible structural system, which could also be flexible in taking on changing loading variations as well, and could move and be moved as the site was also coming to its final shape. And there you go. That is how the idea for the Eden biomes, it was very much, and it's actually really explicit of how Grimshaw work in taking a very constraints-led approach, starting from basic principles and moving on to come with an idea which is again born out of the function and the needs of the building. And so these panels are prefabricated, they're easy to construct, easy to transport as well, and they started to create the eventual biome. The other thing was obviously the skin of the biome, and we did not want to use glass. So the idea was to start looking at alternatives, and one of them was this ETFE. It's basically a lightweight foil, and you can eventually, these are made out of 2-meter wide pillows in which there are 3 layers of ETFE, which then create that very lightweight structure. And also actually the quality of ETFE is much better than glass in terms of bringing light in and creating those very optimal conditions for the plants to grow. So that was how we gave shape and thought about the structure of the biomes. But the critical one was, well, how do you place it on the site? So at that time, now this is before BIM, so we made a 3D model, started to do these kind of sun analysis to see, where is the optimum place where the biomes could be located, and also understanding what is the shape of the biomes and how they can be layered onto the site. And then we started putting the biomes together. And again, really reflecting the shape of the soap bubbles as well, and then starting to put them on the site. And you can see how they get submerged, and they really seamlessly follow the topography of the site as well. And then obviously the idea was that one of this set is going to be one for the humid rainforest plants and the other one for the Mediterranean temperate applied typologies. And together they became this kind of link of 8 geodesic domes that came together and gave, organized the full master plan for the Eden project. Alongside with this, there were other ancillary functions. There was a visitor center, which was actually located higher on the site, which allowed for a fantastic view as you came in. It was the gateway to the Eden project and also housed many of the ancillary functions. Inside, in creating that kind of optimum environment, we looked at many sustainable strategies, especially for heating, using passive and cooling methods as well, and other recycling water. And there's a whole host of them in creating that sort of internal optimum environment. And so there you have it. That's the Eden project. It did eventually prove to be a major step in greenhouse architecture, really taking on the tradition which was set by the Victorians 150 years ago. And it has become a true iconic development, a true iconic project, and has been the stage for world events. Here you can see the Queen with the G7 leaders as well, which is just early last year. And Eden doesn't just stop there. With the success of the project, the idea is that there are Edens coming across the world. We've done one more in the north of England. There's one being constructed in China, and we are now testing having Edens in the Czech Republic, in Brazil, and also in Abu Dhabi. So watch this space for more Edens. From Eden, I'm going to move very swiftly on to the Jawhar Airport, Noida, another iconic project, different though, very colorful and flamboyant. Now, airports are one of the building typologies that Grimshaw have really looked at and designed a few. We are experts in understanding airport operations, airport functionality, but again, creating those kind of unique buildings, unique airports really comes from that, from making them very place-specific. And that's why we like to really understand the culture of the places that we are designing to ensure that these fairly large infrastructure projects become very, very contextual. So this is, again, the Noida Airport. And now going back to first principles and really looking at inspiration, one of the places we were looking at was very much the industrial buildings in India. And this is an interesting one. You can see the roof form, which is a parabolic, and it's housing obviously key functions, industrial functions underneath it, so that we started to sort of get some ideas of how this could be translated in creating this new airport. Obviously, looking at the context, you've got, the river Yamuna, and the waters and the flowing of the river also served to sort of think about the geometry of the roof form and the soffit of the airport as well, very much inspired by the river. And the cultures and traditions of India, the colors, the festivals, we really wanted to capture that. I mean, the airport is going to be a key space for arrival for people from across the world. So we wanted to get a sense of India as you arrive at the airport. So this was a key position, a key sort of focus for the airport, the forecourt. And all our ideas sort of came and culminated in the design of this forecourt. And this is actually, we won this project through a competition. So this was the competition winning image, so to say. And this forecourt was twofold. One, sort of an area for arriving passengers, departing passengers, very much a place of transition, but also a key destination in terms of being a multi-purpose space where people could have events and markets could also be held. And you can sort of see here that the forecourt is designed in a way to have landscape, there's planting, there's water bodies as well to help cool down the space, but very much keeping it in a way that it's got some fixed functions, and then it's got spaces where you can have a multitude of other activities as well. And then the landscape doesn't just sit at the forecourt, it stretches out into the areas and then connects to the parking as well. So there's a real greening strategy for this place. And that green thread extends into the airport as well. And the sense is that there will be a set of sort of vertical and horizontal planting, which will be applied across the different spaces of the airport to really humanize and bring down the scale of those airport spaces to make it feel much, much more pleasant as well. And all of that green eventually culminates into the courtyard. So again, reflecting the traditional architecture, the sense of a courtyard, bringing that typology into airports with a sense of the central space, which is again has the flexibility to be openable in times, times like this, when the weather is pleasant and you can actually have a much more open airport environment. Other themes that we thought about was very much this idea of textures and patterns. I mean, this is a fantastic place that we are here. There's a lot of talk about interior design. Interior clothes is a multitude of patterns that we see in Indian architecture and culture, and we wanted to bring that into the airport, particularly in the use of jalis as well, to try and, again, bring that, humanize the space and make it feel much more homely and much more down to sort of human scale, so people would feel really welcome when they come to the airport. And obviously working in the activation and the vibrancy as well. And one of the key aspects has been the role of art. So as architects, we don't design art, but we have identified locations across the airport where you could commission artists and you could have Indian art being displayed as part of the airport interiors. And all of this comes and culminates again in that same forecourt. And the design of it is really at different levels. So whether you're an arriving passenger or departing passenger, you can really appreciate the space through and across the different scales. And it's not a static space. It's got retail, but also it's got flexibility in the way the spaces can be used as well. What we were also very conscious of, and I know that a lot of you would have experienced, that there's a lot of activity that happens at the airport threshold in India. These are very, sometimes chaotic, but very busy places where there's an interchange, there are people coming, people going, there are a lot of emotions being played out. And so we felt that it was really important for an Indian airport to have that sort of forecourt where you could have space to breathe and to really play out all those emotions and the activities associated with an airport. Now, the critical one about the forecourt is it's actually an outdoor space. It's just going to be covered by the iconic roof. So it's been fairly critical to look at passive forms of cooling, which can be included within the design to create a much more ambient and comfortable. And obviously, some of these are the canopy in itself, biophilia, bringing in different landscape, water bodies, trying to look at where you could have cooler spots and warmer spots, but really building in those kind of passive cooling systems and making sure that the airport can be as sustainable as possible. And reflecting that very much within the courtyard as well. Similar, really looking and applying the much more sort of traditional forms of cooling so that the airport can be very energy efficient as well. And so that's the critical design and how it's starting to play out. It's under construction at the moment, and I think it's meant to be operational in a year or so. And it will be the new airport for Delhi and for Noida and for India as well. And I think that's the end. Thank you very much.